Welcome back to day one of Malaysia Tech Month 2021. We have heard from some of the greatest minds earlier, from digital ecosystem leaders and creators, leading-edge companies, as well as talents who all serve a common purpose as change agents in building the digital economy. Now, continuing on that momentum, let us dive right into the second half of today's program with a panel discussion on the ASEAN and global trade partners' digital economy journey. Allow me to call upon Mr. Gopi Ganesalingam, Vice President, Tech Ecosystems and Globalisation, MDEC Malaysia, to lead the panel session. Over to you, Gopi.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second half of the first day of MTM 2021, MDEC's signature yearly Tech Fest. This session brings together the leaders of digital economy stakeholders and ecosystem drivers to discuss the challenges, trends, and opportunities that the dynamic ASEAN market is looking at. We have an outstanding and very credible selection of panelists from all over the globe to speak and share their views, comments, and opinions. Let me introduce our esteemed panelists, and I need to read out the details, as otherwise I am not doing justice to these great people on this panel. Firstly, YBhg, Datuk Wira, Dr. Haji Rais Hussin Mohamed Ariff, Chairman of MDEC. Dr. Rais is an avid strategy, perennial wordsmith, social engineer, serial entrepreneur, and a serious policy intellectual. He is also the president and CEO of MN Research that specializes in data-driven research on any given national or international issues. He has more than 23 years of corporate experience in leading and managing local and global telecommunications, technologies, and IT companies. He has been very actively promoting inbound investments, technology, and execution for the high-tech, high-value projects in Malaysia and the exciting growth markets of the ASEAN economic zone. Among the issues that fascinates him are those related to disruptive change, big data, the wide use of apps-driven economy, algorithms, and artificial intelligence. So, straddling between science, strategy and comms, and policy advice, Dr. Rais has sought to convince governments to adopt a private-public partnership as advocated by World Bank. Second panelist, Dr. Chinaprayoon, Executive Vice President, Digital Economy Promotion Agency, or DEPA, from Thailand. Dr. Chinawut is currently the Executive Vice President and Acting Director of Digital Industry Promotion Department at DEPA. In addition to the role with DEPA, he is also an independent director for InnoSpace Thailand Company Limited. Before joining DEPA, he was the Director of New Ventures and Entrepreneurship and Chief Strategy Officer at the National Science, Technology and Innovation Policy Office. His previous roles include the setting up of Startup Thailand platform, as well as the launching of the new laws and regulation to support the new breed of innovative entrepreneurs. Dr. Chinawut holds a PhD in Technology and Innovation Management from Rensselaer Polytech Institute, New York, and also a Master's in Public Policy from Georgia Institute of Technology, Atlanta. He is also an avid serial entrepreneur, successfully building a few innovative travel businesses. Our third panelist, Dr. Amy Hochadel, Director of Global Growth, Connected Places, Catapult, United Kingdom. Dr. Hochadel is an expert in global cities and currently the Director of Global Business at Connected Places, Catapult in London, England. She works with local leaders, entrepreneurs, cities, national governments around the world, including the Gulf states, India, Malaysia, Africa, the European Union, the UK, and the US. She is the author of Local Leadership in Global Era, Policy and Behavioral Change in Cities, exploring the changing role local leaders are playing in addressing local challenges through global engagement. Dr. Hochadel has over 2 decades of experiences in politics and public policy and community, government, and international relations. She served as special advisor to congressional and presidential candidates across the United States, as well as for British members of parliament, has been a guest lecturer at Howard's Kennedy School of Government, and proudly serves as a member of the United Nations Global Happiness Policy Subcommittee. Last, but definitely not the least, David Mann, Chief Economist, Asia Pacific, Middle East and Africa, Mastercard, Singapore. As Chief Economist, Asia Pacific and Middle East, Africa, David's responsibilities include development and the delivery of differentiated economic, financial, policy, and market thought leadership for customers, Mastercard, and public policy. David comes to Mastercard with over 20 years of experience at Stanchart, having worked in different roles at the bank, including Asia Chief Economist and most recently, Global Chief Economist. Prior to this, he was responsible for coverage of the US economy and also the Latin America, providing clients with the bank's view on Asia in US time zone. David also worked as senior FX strategist based in London and Hong Kong with the bank. David has won numerous awards for his outstanding work, including being the top-ranked Asia Macro Research Team among investors in Asia Money Poll and the Ripchinsky Young Economist Prize for work on the Malaysian Ringgit Barometer. David appears regularly on CNN, CNBC, BBC, and Bloomberg for his macroeconomics insight. And today, ladies and gentlemen, he's here on MTM 2021. Welcome, panelists, and thank you very much for spending the afternoon with us. We have a robust round of discussions, very good thought leaders here at our panel. And if you could allow me just 2 more minutes, let me put ASEAN into context. ASEAN Digital Master Plan 2025, jointly developed by the member nations of ASEAN, described this master plan as forward-looking 5-year plan that could set ASEAN to be a global digital powerhouse. The GDP value of this 600 million plus population would be worth over USD 300 billion by the year 2025. This, by any standard, is not small. The ASEAN Master Plan's vision is simply to see ASEAN region making giant strides toward becoming both a digital economy and a digital society. A substantial portion of the ASEAN population will now own broadband devices, and cloud services could make it possible to deliver innovative functionality at low cost. While the COVID-19 pandemic has opened the eyes of policymakers, regulators, businesses alike to the advantages of digitally enabling a wide range of economic activities. So diving in, ladies and gentlemen, let's dig deep into the knowledge of these panelists and see what's going on. Dr. Rais, can I ask you the first question, please? I'll open the floor by asking you, it's always nice to talk about opportunities. Let's begin with that note. What are the scalable digital opportunities that ASEAN is looking at? What's your opinion?
I think we all know ASEAN is a very diversified and to a certain extent or lesser extent homogeneous market and society that has been evolving all this while. We have the fastest growing internet market in the world with close to 125,000 new users coming into internet every day. Digital economy itself projected to about $1 trillion to regional GDP over the next 10 years. And this is a huge opportunity that is available. And obviously, as we speak, there's also a pandemic, COVID-19, ravaging through the ASEAN countries. We know that now we are epicenter of the new outbreak after India of the COVID-19. Be that as may, it also gives us some opportunities to be able to move a lot of businesses into the digital platform. So from a very high touch economy, meaning you go to the shop, you buy things, blah, 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 to a low touch economy. A low touch economy, essentially, you do everything on the platform. You buy everything on the platform. Thank God my 9-year-old kid, Kamal Hassan, can buy a lot of things online. The only thing that he cannot do is pay. Thank God for that. And otherwise, he can do a lot of purchases. So there are cross opportunities. And then I always advocate a regional market rather than a very domesticated market. If you talk about Malaysia, it's just a 32.5 million market. But if you talk about ASEAN, it's about 600 million market. So these are all those opportunities. There's also some dramatic uptake of digital technologies. We look in just ASEAN, 40 million people came online for the first time in 2020 alone. And that's a huge leap, huge jump, bringing the total number of internet to about 400 million up from 250 million just in 2015. So I think going forward, this is going to be a new norm, new way of buying and selling and departing from the good old days when there's going to be a lot of high touch economy. The National E-Commerce Strategy Roadmap, NESR 2.0, which is again led by MDEC, also targeting almost 1 million, about 875,000 micro, small and medium enterprises. These are very, very important for them to adopt into e-commerce because they cannot only focus on a very domesticated, localized market. They have to diversify. MDEC initiative has affected more than 489,000 MSME who have adopted e-commerce, and the numbers goes on. The sector also attracted investment worth close to $365 billion in ringgit Malaysia term, about 1.4 billion ringgit. These are the various things that is happening. There's an opportunity in the area of cyber security. That's another huge opportunity. Obviously, when there's more traffic, more bandwidth, more volume transacted or online, cybersecurity become also a very critical issue. This is another big thing. So I think all in all, we have a huge opportunity, and MDEC also have embarked upon what we call the Malaysia 5.0, which is a very, very critical component of going forward for MDEC. I will explain a little bit more on this a little later, but in every crisis, there's an opportunity. A cliche maybe, but I think we need to take it that we need to survive. I've been always talk about survive to restart. And for now, digital platform, digital economy looks to be the way forward in facing this pandemic. If you ask me when this pandemic is going to end, I think it's contingent upon many factors, chief among which is the rapid vaccination. I talked about Gegenpress, right? Gegenpress is the terminology in Germany that is used by the greatest world football team called Liverpool. And they provide intensity in the game. Likewise, we need to intensify the vaccination. So until then, when we reach the herd immunity, we are going to get a little time that we need to face the new norm, and we have no choice. But given that, as I said, in every crisis, there's an opportunity, expansion of the market, a new market, and so on and so forth. So we can always look at the negatives, we can look at all the challenges ahead, but the stronger ones will look at the positive elements of it. So I think this is a time to rebuild, recalibrate, reshape, retool, reinvent the organization and taking into consideration of the circumstances, the ground reality that we are facing today.
Thank you, Doctor. I paraphrase that in every problem there's opportunity. Best thing to do is grab that opportunity, and that opportunity is now democratizing the digital economy, which means that you go from the high level to every level of society. So use the digital economy and grow the GDP. Dr. Chinawut, what's your perspective with what Dr. Rais has said, and what are you doing from Thailand?
Yes, we see the opportunities shining up during the COVID-19 a lot in terms of digital transformation. We know the numbers that people are saying we are adopting digital transformation faster for 5 to 6 years in terms of because of the COVID pandemic. And if you look into the figures and numbers, actually ASEAN countries are leading the world in terms of internet users and adoptions in many aspects. For example, Thailand has topped the numbers of mobile banking usage for about 70%, and Malaysia is one of the top with 50 or 60%. And then we also see the number like online gaming that Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia are one of the top countries in the world that using online gaming, which is going to be another part of digital life. Apart from work and leisure, gaming is a big market coming forward. We also see growth in e-commerce in ASEAN as well. Indonesia is one of the top of the countries that using e-commerce. Thailand is also another growing market as well, and Malaysia and Philippines as well. And we see we have attract eyes from all over the world that we start to have our own ASEAN unicorns. Indonesia got first. Thailand just got our first unicorn during the COVID pandemic. And then these are the area that we can showcase to the world that ASEAN is the land opportunities, despite that we are facing the hardest, test of our public health system right now. In terms of the government, I think Thailand has been very direct that we have to be able to bring our economy into digital transformations. The setting up a depa 5 years ago is one of the initiatives that the government trying to do systemically accelerate the digital economy adoption in Thailand. During these 2 years of the pandemic, we are not just only working to enhance and making our startups with more capacity building, but also we try to look into in terms of digital inclusiveness, how we can also bring together not just the people who already have the opportunities to shining in the digital era, but the people who are left behind. What about the local communities across the countries? What about the local SMEs? What about the small micro entrepreneurs? How they're going to be able to adopt this kind of technology and be survive during this phase of the digital transformation, digital disruptions, and the pandemic. So the policies that direct to help them be able to live in the age of digital economy is very important. So not just only we try to, for example, in Thailand, not just only we try to enhance and invest in our startups, and also open up the market for foreign startups to be able to settle here, but we also trying to help how the adoption rates for SMEs and local communities to use digital technology to enhance their life and provide them with the new opportunities, new income, new occupations sometimes. It's very important for us as well. So that's why we also looking into the demand side of the policy, which is very important for, I think in terms of the governments, the demand side policy support for how people can start to adopt and utilize digital technology to be able to enhance their life and enhance their income and revenue. This is something I think is very important in this current time.
Thank you, Dr. Chinawut. So to paraphrase what you just said, so Thailand, from your lens, you're looking at adoption. So adoption across the board, whether it's fintech, whether it's games, it's adoption of the digital tech. I like what you just said. But during the COVID crisis, Thailand gave birth to its unicorn. And I really like that because Malaysia also, during the crisis, has given birth to our own first unicorn, Kasem, which was on the air today at MTM this morning. So very good. There lies the opportunity in a crisis situation.
Right.
Dr. Amy Hochadel, Global Business Growth Director. What's your take, coming in from Europe, looking at the lenses from Europe into ASEAN? What's your take on this?
Thank you, Gopi, and thank you, Dr. Rais. And I think Dr. Rais is absolutely right. Malaysia is becoming a digital powerhouse, which is why it is so exciting around the world for multiple layers of the digital ecosystem, whether you're talking about other governments, other entrepreneurs, investors. Malaysia creates a very interesting opportunity. And he's also right, Malaysia plus ASEAN nations, that means that all eyes are directed towards Southeast Asia in particular, looking at the digital opportunity. And you see nations all around the world creating, and the UK has recently created a digital trade network specifically for Southeast Asia, where we've invested £8 million into getting our companies ready to partner with your companies in the region because we see a major opportunity. I think that when we talk about digital transformation in the region, it's important that both investors, public governments, and entrepreneurs understand that there are multiple layers to digital transformation and the digital economy when you're talking about opportunities. So there are locations that will need increased digital infrastructure. How do we increase the access to things like Wi-Fi, broadband, get those into our schools, into more rural areas? We're talking about the infrastructure of digital transformation. In addition to that, we're talking about digital applications that sit on top of the infrastructure. And you'll find a lot of these in the larger cities, KL, for example, where you have a solid digital infrastructure, and it's about encouraging entrepreneurs to build applications on top of that infrastructure that help facilitate uptake and increase efficiency. A third area that is also going to be critical is to understand how we apply digital infrastructure and digital services to government services. And this is very critical in the current environment with COVID and the global pandemic. We want to create those touch-free services, but we also want to create more efficiencies. We want to make sure that everyone has access to those digital services. We want to make sure that services can still be provided. And underlying those areas of opportunity, I think we should never forget that this is about improving lives. This is about creating technology and innovation and digital services that are for efficiencies, that can serve people. And in that sense, a lot of these new innovations around the digital economy are invisible. They sit behind the scenes, and really the general benefit of them is that they are unseen, but they make lives easier and better and improve the situation in various environments. And so I think that whenever we're approaching these opportunities, we should approach them with the user-centered design approach, the human-centered design approach, and think, why am I improving this service? Who is it going to serve? How can I make it better? And then which digital application will be important for that? And that's what people that are looking into the region need to think about, those different types of layers and those different types of opportunities. And so the last thing I'll say is around the pandemic, because we cannot ignore it. There has been a major impact, and certainly a central role in when we talk about digital transformation and the digital economy. And I think there's three critical areas, and we talk about crisis, but we also talk about opportunity. The first is that cities are forced to become more digital. So cities that were already on a digital path towards transformation have fared better in the pandemic. They're more easily able to maintain services during this time. But what that means is there's a large group that needs to catch up. Digitizing services is now absolutely 100% essential. Second, cities and places across ASEAN need to become more agile and open, which means the kind of innovation testbed opportunity. So we need to be able to say, well, we've never done that before, but we're open to testing remote learning, testing remote working, testing new forms of digital services. We need to be open to innovation, and that's going to be critical. So we have to break down those barriers that also Gopi and Dr. Rais were talking about. If there are regulatory barriers, if there are market barriers, we need to work together to remove them, because we need to become more agile. And then third is the big opportunity, and I think this is critical. The digital transformation is going to go a very long way to helping all of us achieve net zero opportunities. And I think net zero and decreasing, helping climate change and working together as a region and as global partners, and the application of digital services to do that will increase our path to net zero. And that's the real opportunity. And I think before the pandemic, we talked about net zero, but not with the sense of urgency and opportunity that we're seeing today. So for me, I think that's the big opportunity here.
Thank you, Dr. Hochadel. So I hear so many things, but if I want to paraphrase, the one that I heard very loud was there's digital transformation happening. The opportunities here in ASEAN. ASEAN is very attractive. We've got a lot of opportunities in government becoming a digital adopter, a digital user, digitizing. We're going to see more smart cities emerging. Smart cities are not just smart traffic lights, but digital services, online services, So lots of opportunities to transform our cities into smart cities, transform our government into using more digitized services. Thank you very much. And I'm moving on with to David. David, from a private sector, I mean, we've heard from 3 governments, ecosystem builders, but from the private sector, how do you see ASEAN, and what are your views on what the 3 panelists have just expressed?
Thank you. And it's a real pleasure to be here speaking to you all today during this panel discussion. The first point that I would like to make on this was so many great points that have been made earlier on just how advanced already the ASEAN region as a whole has been and how it has accelerated during the COVID crisis, is that we have to think of it in terms of what the outlook is, firstly, over the next 6 to 12 months and beyond with COVID, but also specifically on digital. We know that those who were already the early digital adopters globally, those were the ones we saw going into overdrive during this crisis. They had the much larger gains in the shifts towards digital, and those gains to us look to be much more permanent than the countries who were far, far behind and much later adopters, or they had a much smaller share, say, of e-commerce pre-crisis. And that is a pattern we've seen around the world. Of the other interesting patterns that we've been seeing, we would say that the essential retail sectors, those that had the smallest digital share before the crisis, also actually saw some of the biggest and more permanent gains as consumers adapted. We know that during this time when people were forced online because you didn't want to, for safety reasons, go out, particularly for the older generations who may have been more reluctant, more concerned about the security issues that come with going online to transact, that was a point where we saw so much more adoption. And that's an extra reason why it seems so far in the places around the world that have been opening up a bit more. And of course, that has not been a straight line. It's very nonlinear in its nature. We have seen it even more sticky trend of using online channels. And we think that is something that is, again, just been supercharged by the crisis, and it will stick. A next point I would like to stress is that we've also seen cross-border e-commerce making serious strides as well. We know that we saw the shift to digital within economies, but also the number of distinct other economies where e-commerce was taking place in individual markets increased quite substantially during the crisis. A lot more players getting used to using these channels more. And so this really, I may use an analogy with vaccinations. This crisis absolutely did give a shot in the arm to the rise of digital. There's no question about that. The main challenge, of course, that we know that we have in this region is in the region as a whole. As already mentioned, the urgency of rolling out vaccines and having a certain time frame for businesses to be able to plan on when they should expect that something close to theoretical herd immunity can be achieved. That is a key driver for us on thinking about the post-COVID environment. Of course, there are always complications. There are non-linearities in both directions, but it matters, of course, a lot, for example, for the travel industry. But it also is a reminder, because we've had so many swings, and we've gone through already a good 18 months of this crisis, that the adoption of digital, particularly by the small and medium-sized enterprises who were not so well advanced compared to larger enterprises pre-crisis, that it's even more reason to push harder on ensuring that they have all of what they need in place to enable them to be able to transact in the digital economy of the future.
Thank you, David. And looks like that entire COVID-19 situation has given tailwind to companies like Mastercard as you pivot the model and you apply that digital platform across and look for adoption. So that brings us, so it's a very good question to my next question, let's go deeper into it, because there's adoption. All 4 of you have mentioned there's been massive adoption, and we know COVID-19 is the chief adoption officer globally, and there's been massive adoption. So my second question is to go deeper into this. So COVID-19 has brought out massive digital adoption for everything from online shopping to streaming entertainment, to telehealth, to agri-tech, to fintech. So the question on everybody's mind, what will it take to maintain this momentum? Dr. Rais, back to you.
Even pre-COVID-19, there was digital adoption in a big way. COVID-19 just accelerated by sheer of the fact that from a high-touch economy to the low-touch economy, people basically cannot visit shops and people cannot have that physical contact anymore. So that's why from a very high-touch economy, we moved on to low-touch economy. A lot of examples, even McKinsey report have stated very clearly, 600 to 800 million jobs are going to be obsolete with the advent of 4IR. Let's take an example, AI in banking sector have recalibrated the position. More than 60-70% of the employees of banks in Europe and America is now actually with the IT background. They're not financial or accountants and so on. Things are going to change. Things were changing remarkably. And if you remember Deutsche Bank used to propel the German's economy for decades. And today, they need to be bailed out frequently. And the smaller banks, which is the digital banks, are becoming big and they're becoming bigger. So at the end of the day, we understand that the whole societal fabric is changing, you like it or not, with this post-COVID. Working from home, for instance, doesn't require any more large-scale offices. I think post-COVID, hopefully, we talked about herd immunity in Malaysia. We hope that we will reach herd immunity by February. Realistically, politicians will tell you everything, but realistically, February or March next year, we should reach the herd immunity at about 82%, including the Malaysians and also non-Malaysians. Non-Malaysians, the documented and the documented. To reach a credible herd immunity, you need all that, right? Now, say we reach that, only then we can see a little bit light at the end of the tunnel. And if you say, well, will that maintain the momentum? Obviously. You talked about agri-tech, my favorite subject. We saw in agri-tech, even in MDEC, for the last 2 years, we've done proof of concept, fertigation in various 7 areas different, shrimp farming, chili, this and that. And we find very good results, 33% increase in yield, 22% increase in income of the farmers. What does that mean? Simultaneously, you address the digital inclusion issues and income inequality issues. And now the farmers are coming back for more. Last time, the bankers were having difficulties in funding them because they feel it's high risk. Now, when they see the results, the bankers are more comfortable in coming forward to what we call finance the farmers. And this is something that very, very different. I mean, we all know, I don't know how many bankers are there. Bankers normally give money to people who don't need it. And the farmers, they really need the money and they do not get it. So this whole of society, whole of government, whole of system approach is something that is taking place. Sometimes it is forcibly on us because of the current situation that we are in. Now, having said that, MDEC has been proactive in this area. We did not sit on our laurels. I think next month we are going to celebrate our 25th anniversary. That's a long, long time of existence for any agency. And we took a decision to launch our Malaysia 5.0, which was announced by the minister in charge early this year, this inaugural New Year speech, and the Prime Minister himself. And what's Malaysia 5.0? I think loosely based on Society 5.0, the Japanese version. We have that in Scandinavian countries, in German also adopting it. In Malaysia, we have this mission of creating a society deeply integrated with technology, governed by inclusive and equitable eco-environmental principles and practices. Eco-environmental is a combination of economy and environment. Now, these are very, very, some people may say philosophical. Yes, it's philosophical, but you need a vision. You need a mission. You need an objective. You need a specific KPI. We are not talking about digital economy or digitization for the few. We are talking about digital economy for the many. I think this is a very, very clear distinction that we have to make. Somebody talked about human-centered. We are talking about human-centered. Somebody talked about digital inclusion and income inequality, we are talking about the same thing. This agri-tech initiative has happened and proven beyond the shadow of doubt. So at the end of the day, again, Malaysia has also initiated, hopefully not the rah-rah type of events. I'm a little bit against this kind of rah-rah type of events where you talk a lot of things, but at the end of the day, the benefit is not felt by the many. It is felt only by the few, probably the contractors and the one who organizes the events. We do not want that. What we want is that when we do something, we are talking about 600 people, 600 million people in ASEAN. We talk about 32.5 million people in Malaysia. We want to make sure no one left behind. And when we say that, we mean that. We are not saying that as well like politicians like to do. They like to make the words and so on. Again, yeah, of course, we are now competing against the entertainment that's going on in the parliament now. And it's very difficult. Not easy to beat the parliament entertainment. But having said that, I think MDEC is a very serious organization. We need to be focused, right? Focus. We can talk big things, but we need to be focused. We need to deliver what we need to deliver for the benefit of the many. Malaysia, we have a Panelists to Sabah. We are not confined to just Kuala Lumpur. Panelists to Sabah. I've told this to the team. I have some amazing talents who goes and sit down with the farmers and learn from them. Sometimes just because we have a PhD, like for instance, I have a PhD in finance and econometrics, that doesn't mean I know everything, right? There's certain things I learned from farmers. I was amazed that they have very simplistic solution to a very complex problem because they are on the ground. So I think we need to also have that approach that we need to go on the ground, learn, look at whatever that we have and how we can customize and provide the solution for the many. And that is all MDEC is all about, and that is Malaysia 5.0 is all about.
Thank you, Doctor. Very well put. So in paraphrasing it is, we know it works. The COVID-19 situation has shown us it works. We've got to be focused. We've got to press the accelerator. We've got to push forward. Malaysia's answer is a fourth IR and society, Malaysia 5.0. So thank you very much. And to Dr. Chinawut, what's your opinion and how do you see maintaining the momentum of the adoption that's taken place?
Yes, I think the COVID pandemic has come with the biggest, the largest social experiment. We have been talking a lot about how we can cutting the red tape from the government, public agencies, or even the corporates as well. How we can help to digital technology to be adopted by many. I think COVID-19 has bring about the largest regulatory sandbox in our time. We cut a lot of red tape. For example, depa is one of the organizations, the first organization in Thailand to be able to invest directly into startups, and we help this startup to be able to access to the market, private and public market as well. Before COVID-19, it has been very hard time for us how we can connect them with the users, especially for public institutions that they are facing with a lot of regulations and rules and policies. But during the COVID-19, it had been all the people has been forced to use the technology, and they, for example, for things like a telemedicine. In the last, last month, that Thailand faced the severe COVID pandemic yet. This is the time that people are adopting all the hospitals in Thailand, all the public agencies has been adopted technology that developed by health tech startups that we are grooming them to be able to provide the telemedicine solutions for people to stay home, get the vaccine, get the medicine, and can talk to the doctors and nurses. So this is the things I think is very important for us in terms of how we can maintain this kind of momentum to help our startups and digital entrepreneurs that we are investing in them, grooming them to be able to maintain the momentum as a catalyst for change.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is you found your magic formula, your secret recipe in Thailand. That is the smaller startups, the digital tech startups are your answers. and hence the government and the industry is focused in helping to build them up for a greater play.
Right.
Very good. Amy, what's your take from coming in from Europe and looking at this in a different lens? And how is the situation so different in Europe and in ASEAN?
I think, there's differences, but there's far more similarities than there are differences. This train has left the station. There won't be, uptake is not the question. And Dr. Rais said it's delivery. There's a practical element to this. Now this is about creating accessibility of all of the services that we've been exposed to and that we've been forced to take up, making sure that I don't think I can say it better than Dr. Rais, that there's equity, accessibility, but general uptake as well. So you've created a technical innovation, a digital service. Now there's a real effort that has to happen across the leadership like MDEC and across the ASEAN partnership around uptake of those services. Not everyone is always so quick to take them up. We were forced to at the beginning, but if we want to see sustainability and momentum, we have to ensure that there's continuous uptake of these services. And what that means is a lot of continuous improvement. And that's what we're seeing in the UK. That's what we're seeing across Europe, is not just the delivery of the services, but the uptake and the continuous improvement, because they are here to stay. And so I think, we go back to that user-centered design approach. Why do people need these? How do they want to use them? How will it improve their lives? That's on one side of the equation. On the other side are things that we need to do to make sure that this momentum continues and that they're sustainable. In looking at the issue of resilience in our cities, resilience in the infrastructures that we're putting in place. We know that there are a lot of vulnerabilities to digital infrastructure, and we've had to put a lot of things in place in a very short amount of time. So I think one of the things we need to do now is to turn our minds to the issue of resilience in cities, when we look at the smart city frameworks and things like cybersecurity, resilience against shock, whether that's economic shocks, as we've seen with the pandemic, whether that's environmental shocks, which we're seeing more and more of around the world. I think we need to start to think about this in the context of resilience. And resilience for our cities, for our infrastructure, for our places, is a really important way to maintain that momentum and that sustainability. And I'll just give you one quick example around both sides of this equation, the accessibility and the uptake, but also the resilience. We've recently run a project in Malaysia with our organization, looking at mobility as a service. And if you take the example of KL, which has great public transport and services. And this is almost an analogy for the uptake during this time. The central business districts have always had strong digital core services, good public transport, good infrastructure. And now the question is, how do you take that outside of that central business district into the suburbs and into rural areas? A challenge that we were posed was to say, how do we increase that uptake outside of KL? How do we expand the good services that we've already provided? How do we make them more accessible? And so you start to look at things like mobility as a service, but you look at the expansion, the accessibility, the uptake, and that inevitably means that we need to look at the resilience. And I think that we don't need a lot of explanation as to why we need to look at resilience anymore as a critical issue.
Thank you, Amy. So I hear very loud and clear. Your opinion is keep the resilience, keep pivoting, customer experience, disrupt the disruptors, keep going on, and hence you have that adoption. David, what's your take? Very quickly.
Well, I think the most important thing that we should really think about with what's coming next and how to really make sure that everything we've seen changes, sticks, and the main word that I've been hearing again and again is on this point about resilience. It also should apply to supply chains. At the very beginning of this crisis, we know that what we were worrying about the most was that when you get, for example, this sort of equivalent of the natural disaster that we've been going through with COVID, that you cannot be too exposed because of a just-in-time supply chain, and instead should be moving more towards a just-in-case type supply chain of thinking of a +1 strategy. Where else could I be sourcing my goods from? And on top of that, if you are increasing the number of counterparties that you're actually interacting with? What about the security element and the safety element of adopting these new types of technologies? We know that there's estimated out there about in 2021, cybercrime will cost the world about $6 trillion US. And these sorts of issues to do with safety, as people in particular, smaller companies as well that maybe are not so used to being in the digital space, as they see more adoption, those risk factors and the resilience factor is absolutely critical, I would agree.
Thank you, David. So what I'm hearing from you is the supply chain has to be more robust. We've learned a lesson. We somehow came in, but we need to be a more solid supply chain using the digital platform. Sticking with you, David, I've got 13 minutes more, but I want to ask one question for each one of the panelists. It's a unique question for you, David. I would like to ask this question on how has Mastercard taken advantage of this crisis and helped the SME?
Well, I have to say on the SME side, it's been a major focus all the way up to the top of Mastercard on this issue. We've seen the SMEs were amongst the hardest hit at the beginning of this pandemic. Initially, they would have been caught off guard without all of the right skill sets and knowledge to be able to transform their business, to take it online quickly. And that's partly why Mastercard has been going ahead with these suites of B2B and B2B2C solutions to help small businesses on adapting into the digital world and do it at a fast pace that they need to adopt to survive. This is a crucial need. Now, we've been working with a lot of partners, local banks, and to help the SMEs in various countries on getting digital solutions and moving towards more of these cashless modes of payments. One example that I can give is that with DBS, say in Singapore, we launched the DBS Logistics P-Card, helping SMEs with a digital or close to contact-free solution on settling payments and collections at container depots, taking away the need to manage physical cash, for example. And that on top of our Mastercard Track global trade platform, helping to simplify and enhance how companies can do business with each other. I mentioned a lot more of the cross-border, a lot more smaller entities trading cross-border as well. They're looking to and need to partner up with the right folks and the right systems to ensure that they do it in a way that does not add to any of their operational risk and instead helps to reduce it. Now, we've been seeing across the ASEAN region with the different real-time payment system, a lot more of the different rails of payments being made available. And this to us is a critical part for helping economies when we know that SMEs account for the lion's share of employment in any economy that we look at worldwide. That's what makes it so vital that they're not left behind. And that's what I've been hearing again and again, also from my other esteemed colleagues on this panel.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Dr. Chinawut, since you have a background on policy and regulatory framework, here's a question for you. Given ASEAN is made up of 10 different countries with very unique demographics, spoken languages, independent rules and regulations, and some even say protective regulatory frameworks, how does your organization navigate ASEAN?
Yes, I think as ASEAN, diversity is something which is very beautiful for us. I think we can learn from each other. For example, one of the policies that the DEPA has been secretary for the country is the running Thailand Smart City program. And last year, we have a good opportunity to host the ASEAN Smart City networks that we can learn from each other. Together, 26 of the ASEAN cities have been joining in the first batch. I think with that kind of program, we can start to learn how you can start to thinking about the smart city standard. What do you do together? How do we mean by the smart city? How we can grow our entrepreneurs, digital entrepreneurs, to be able to scale up the solutions to be able to serve each different demand from each cities. These kind of things that I think we can find some of the grounds to work together in the common issues that we are facing today. For example, right now, I'm also in touch with our Malaysian colleagues, for example, in YBhg right now, talking about how we can helping our startup to provide solutions to help with the COVID pandemic. So we can learn and share with each other how together we think these kind of things ASEAN can move forward together.
Wonderful, thank you. Amy, since you are the expert in global growth, I have a question for you. We've spoken about companies coming into ASEAN. How do you look at ASEAN entrepreneurs, and what is your advice to the ASEAN entrepreneurs to going beyond ASEAN, going into the European market, going to the US market, Australian market, African market, the Middle East market? What is your advice?
Well, there is one word of advice that I always give, which is partner. Partner with other entrepreneurs, partner with businesses. This is how we can scale up. This is how we can create sustainability. This is how we can also diversify the existing solutions that we have. One of the ways that we run programs, I mentioned the program that we ran in KL around mobility as a service. We run these types of programs all over the world on the ground, looking at city challenges. So if you start with that challenge-led approach, and that's my advice to entrepreneurs, whether they're coming from ASEAN or looking into ASEAN, we need to look at what's the problem we're trying to solve. There's a lot of people that come up with a clever idea. You know, I've created this amazing widget. Would you like to buy it? What problem does it solve? And that's more important in this environment that we're living in now more than ever. So a challenge-led approach is critical, but partnering, I think, is going to be the way that different entrepreneurs can scale up and solve solutions better. So what we encourage across all of our projects that we run at Connected Places Catapult is that our entrepreneurs form things like joint ventures and agreements with entrepreneurs in other locations. Let's not compete against each other. Let's form joint ventures. What that does for our entrepreneurs and for other entrepreneurs, it creates a pathway into a new market, whether that's entering the ASEAN region or those entrepreneurs looking to enter the UK market. It creates a pathway. It creates a local partner. So it helps to break down some of those barriers of, how does this procurement process work? What are these standards that I need to meet? When you have a local partner, you create a pathway to those types of opportunities. And then third, it creates sustainability. You now have a partner in a local region, and that local partner has you, and vice versa. You can start to look at the next opportunity. You can start to look at, how do we take the application that we've applied in Malaysia and take that across Indonesia and Vietnam and Thailand. And so partnerships is going to be a critical way that we start to scale up these solutions. Partnerships through a challenge-led approach. And that's what I'm a huge advocate of in this type of environment of entrepreneurs and innovators.
Fantastic, thank you. Last but not least, Dr. Rais, I know you're passionate about talent. I know you're passionate about digital talent. The ASEAN Digital Skills Task Force is focused on developing the human capital pool in ASEAN to ensure that citizens have the skills needed to thrive, as digital disruption creates both risks and opportunities for workers. We are still struggling when it comes to digital skills in ASEAN. What are the measures taken by your agency to address this?
I think, as you rightly put, center for everything is talent. We need the right talent with the right skill, right knowledge, and right abilities to engender and lead the digital economy to new heights. And having said that, obviously, MDEC as an agency have been conducting a lot of specific programs like the My Digital Workforce, where we have about close to 100 million ringgit in training and salary incentives for training and hiring incentive program, boosting the digital business services. I think these are very important. More than 300 companies can participate in this, creating 6,000 employment and hopefully 1,000 quality tech talents. These are all things that we are doing. And on top of that, GLOWS, digital initiative, talents, training, mentor, so many things that we are doing. But it is very important to note that having said that, we must tailor-make trainings that is going to really build talents with the right skill, knowledge, and abilities. Sometimes we look at the short-term to medium-term situations, given the fact that now we are under the COVID situation. So we need to want to address the short-term employment situation and so on. In Malaysia, unfortunately, now we have about 1.2 million underemployed or unemployed graduates and youth. We have about 800. That's a huge number, never seen before in the history of Malaysia. But at the same time, MDEC is enabling people to offer their services. We had some opportunities like Glow, where people offering their translation, transcribing, even movie entitling. So these are the things that, and they've made millions, which is something that we are proud of, that we are engendering this thing. But having said that, we still need a very whole of society type of whole approach. We do not want to end up enriching training companies. We want to make sure we empower the people to be able to do what they're supposed to do. And again, when the things are difficult, things are challenging, I like what Amy talked about, international joint ventures. We must remember ASEAN is a 600 million market. And then we have a 1.2 billion market of the Muslim world, which is about close to 3 trillion US dollar market. These are the things that we can work. Malaysia can work. Thailand has done extremely well in the halal market, in the food area, and we can learn from them. As what Dr. Chinawut was talking about, that we can learn from each other. He's talking about magic and so on. I think Malaysia can learn a lot from Thailand in the food security area. We can learn a lot from Singapore, who's ranked #1 in food security in Asia Pacific, despite not having enough land. So these are the things that we can learn, we can collaborate genuinely. They call that the smart partnership. And I like Amy's advocacy of this, because this is something that is going to help us in the medium to long term. Why? If you start just looking into your territory or your small little island, that is not going to make it and help it in the long term. We saw this the current situation that affected, I always call it the troika of challenge, which is the pandemic, the economy, and to a certain extent, although Malaysia has those issues with regards to politics, but globally we do also have that situation. So how do we navigate through these difficult times? So the only way is that we need to stay focused on what we need to do, what we need to deliver for the benefit of the many. I think that is very, very critical. And I think these are the things that we need to really, really consider. And I hope MDEC has been undertaking this task very seriously. I think we have ourselves gone through a reinvent, recalibration, and how do we need to pursue the digital economy going forward, because it cut across all vertical. Without which that we will have a challenge. We cannot work in isolation. We cannot work in small pots of existence. We need to collaborate. So ASEAN is beautiful. Somebody told that ASEAN is beautiful. I think Dr. Chinawut. ASEAN is beautiful. Yes, it is beautiful. How can we make it real beautiful? Work together, collaborate together. Yes, we can compete in some areas, but we complement in many other areas. And together we can build a beautiful ASEAN, a much prettier ASEAN. That's my call. And I think we can do it. We just have to be honest and sincere to what we are doing and what we must do.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rais. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been fantastic. I learned a lot today. I learned that the digital economy is here to stay. It is just accelerating. Keep your eyes focused, keep the initiatives moving, be razor focused, keep pivoting, innovate, pivot, be resilient, connect the dots, connect the world, connect the businesses, and the digital economy is here to stay. With that, we've run out of time. Dr. Rais, Dr. Chinawut, Dr. Amy, David, thank you very much. Have a good day. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gopi, for summing up this session really well. And thank you to all of our expert panelists as well from across the region for imparting your insights with us. Truly an insightful session. Share with us your thoughts on this session by completing the survey below. And our next session on the Asian nations' digital response to the pandemic will begin very shortly. Join us for more engaging conversations in a bit.